concept of like the non-linear, not straightforward career trajectory, I feel is just captured really well in this concept of the squiggly career. So Squiggly Careers is a podcast series hosted by Helen Tupper and Sarah Ellis, and it's also a book, as you can see. And, you know, when I heard the concept of the squiggly career, it's like, yeah, that just captures it so well, right? So the term squiggly, I think, is really good because for a number of reasons. One is, I guess, imaginatively, we tend to think of careers as these, you know, straightforward progressions. You climb the career ladder in a sort of an upward trajectory, whereas the notion of a squiggly wiggly career kind of captures better the unpredictable nature of careers increasingly, and the unpredictable nature and of the way that it is maybe beneficial to explore yourself and explore your career journey. And the other thing that's positive about it is squiggly is kind of like a fun, positively positive, you know, has a positive tone to it. And so whereas we might feel as if this non-linear like progression through a career is something to, you know, to regret, actually there is a huge plus side to it, which is that it does enable us to do greater exploration, which has the benefit, as we saw before, of enabling us to find the best match that is suitable for us.
When we met at university 20 years ago, we made for unlikely friends. I'm an extrovert who gets involved in everything and talks to anyone.
And I'm an introverted ideas person who finds extroverts energising but a bit intimidating.
Despite our differences, we both had an ambition to climb the ladder and have a successful career.
We were motivated by how far and how fast we could progress, and we thought that our route to the top would look something a bit like this. And in those first few years of work, we were all about promotions and pay rises. We were preoccupied by the positions that we held and how senior our job titles sounded. And on the surface, everything seemed to be on track. But we started to get this sense that the ladder might actually be holding us back. The obvious next step wasn't always the most appealing, and we were both excited about exploring opportunities that weren't necessarily based on what we'd done before. It wasn't what we'd anticipated, but our careers had started to look and feel much more like this. Squiggly.
A squiggly career is both full of uncertainty and full of possibility. Change is happening all of the time. Some of it is in our control and some of it's not. Success isn't one size fits all. Our squiggles are as individual as we are. And for me, that's meant a career where I've moved from working on foldable credit cards in one company, they didn't catch on, to building and launching a loyalty app for another. And that one is still going.
And I've moved from making magazines to working on food waste, from a 5 to a 4-day week so I could spend more time on personal projects and volunteering. I've already had more jobs and worked in more organisations than my dad. And he's been working for twice as long as I have. And I'm the rule, not the exception.
When we started to share the idea of squiggly careers with people, we were surprised by how much it stuck. It seemed to give people something that perhaps they didn't even know that they needed, a way of describing both their experiences and their aspirations. Someone even told us that they took our book, which has a big squiggle on the front of it, into a job interview as a way of describing their career so far.
So chapter 6 of the Squiggly Career book attempts to provide us with prompts for self-discovery. They are attempting to push us out of our usual way of thinking about ourselves and our careers and opening much bigger prospects of who we could be. And for example, among the things that they do in the chapter, they ask us to describe 4 kinds of possibilities for ourselves. One is the obvious possibility, if things kind of go according more or less to plan, right? As we might imagine it. Then there is the ambitious possibility of like things going like better than maybe we expect, and then there is the dream possibility of things going like way better than we might expect, and what they call the pivot possibility, where you have to divert from what you might expect towards in another direction altogether, but still making use of some of the fundamental skills that you have. And they ask in chapter 6, just throw some ideas down with respect to what you might look like if you were living these different possibilities into the future, as a way to kind of prompt us to kind of step outside our usual way of thinking and get ourselves out of the tunnel vision. And interestingly and independently, they make some very similar recommendations to the stuff that David Epstein was talking about before. So in addition to emphasizing the fact that the career journey is our journey, and so, they were on that fact, you cannot rely on your manager or your employer to provide a career path for you. They also emphasize the importance of discovering opportunity and finding a good fit, which is basically capturing this notion of match quality that we were talking about earlier. And in doing this, with respect to that future job or the future career, discovering opportunities, exploring, finding a good fit can help ensure that you are moving towards a new role rather than running away from a current one or whatever your current circumstance is. And one of the points I really like occurs at the beginning of chapter 6, and I think is such an important point for us to bear in mind. It's captured in this paragraph here, and the paragraph is headed, "Ditch the destination." So I'll quote, "We need to shift our focus away from plans and destinations to one where we are discovering opportunities and enjoying the journey. Any kind of plan suggests there will be a point where an outcome is achieved. For many, success is defined by achieving that outcome. However, this thinking is broken logic for a happy career." Sean Aker, the positive psychologist and author of The Happiness Advantage, challenges the assumption that success leads to happiness and argues that it happens the other way around. It is people who are the happiest that focus on enjoying the journey and not obsessing over the destination that are the most successful in the long run. And one of the things that I think this paragraph does, which is so important, is that it frees us from having our happiness and having our fulfillment be dependent on some imagined outcome in the years to come. And I think this is something which I can't emphasize. I can't emphasize enough. And one of the quotes that I read, in recent years, was a little quote at the beginning of a book called How to Have a Good Day. And the first quote that starts the whole book is this one from Annie Dillard, and she says, "How we spend our days is, of course, how we spend our lives. How we spend our days is, of course, how we spend our lives." And so, and for me, what this quote does is that we might have we might imagine how it is that we want to live our life and what our life looks like. And usually, when we think of what we want our life to look at, want our life to look like, we often imagine it as it is at some future time, when we've achieved the things that we need to achieve in order to be the happy person or fulfilled person or content person that we want to be, once we sort of tick off the various things that we've decided are important for us. But what Annie Dillard is saying here, at least for me, is that actually all the days that we're spending in building towards that are the days that we are living, which constitute our lives. And we definitely need to focus on the future and what we need to do now in order to build that future. But we also can equally focus on the days in which we are building that future and how to spend those so that we are leading the life that we want to lead. And if we think of this quote as, if we transpose it into like the territory of career advice, it does point us towards some things. So we might think of our career as a destination, but as hard as it might be, it is actually a journey, and not only a journey, but it's also a squiggly one. And furthermore, there's actually a really good and potentially freeing side to this, which is that you don't have to wait to start doing the things that you like. So we might think of our career as us spending the time, spending our work lives doing the things that we want to do that both earn an income and have a fulfilling outcome for us. And that we're building towards that, which we most certainly are. But at the same time, we don't have to only like put off that time for the future and build towards it by doing things that we don't like, but we can be doing those things now. There are ways to start doing the things you think you might like now through volunteering, internships, reading around it, and getting engaged in whatever way is available. And so if our careers are so important to us, if they are such an important source of fulfillment, we want to start investing, we want to start doing it now. And actually we can start doing it now. And doing so has so many advantages that we've covered in this presentation, as well as we're covering in this course. So by doing those, by doing the volunteering and the interning, what are you doing? You're testing out the match quality between you and this area of vocation. What you're doing is you're building networks of people in the area in which you are potentially hoping to be working. What you're doing is developing relationships with people who might be able to act as a reference or write you a reference when you go for your next job. What you're doing is you are working or volunteering for an organization that you might hope to work for, and by doing that, that organization gets to know you in a low-risk way for them, and so that when a position does come up, you are in such a great position to step into that role, because if you have to hire someone who you've never met before, you don't know anything about them, you might be able to see their CV, but you don't know who they are as a human being. You don't know what they're like to work and kind of live with. If you have to give them criticism, is it going to be impossible, or are they going to take it on board, cheerfully and make life easy for you? And so what you're doing by doing all of this stuff is not only are you living the life that you think you hope to lead, but you're setting yourself up in the best way possible. You're setting up the conditions for you to get the role that will hopefully, fulfill you, at least in that moment, until maybe, people change, and so and people might want to change their careers. But for the person you are at this moment, you have set yourself up in the best way possible to make circumstances work out in the most likely way possible for you to land the role that you aspire to, by basically kind of doing the work now. There are very many opportunities for you to get out there and start exploring the world of work and careers now, in addition to the work that you may well be doing to pay the bills, the skills of which we should also not overlook. And the other thing that you can also be doing, in addition to sort of making yourself known to an organization in a low risk way for them, that will make them more well disposed towards potentially hiring you should you apply for a job with them. But the other thing you're doing is that, people know people, and they might go, oh yeah, they might have a friend who works in a similar organization, and they're talking over dinner, and they say, yeah, we're really looking for someone to fulfill a role in this that we got coming up, and they might go, yeah, I know this great person, and they're volunteering with us, and yeah, super reliable, super easy to get on with, and knows the stuff. I'll tell them to I'll connect you, or I'll tell them to apply for this job. And and if you're receiving 10 resumes, or however many resumes, and this friend of yours vouches, this friend of theirs vouches for you, that's going to put you so far ahead of the pack, because you are a known quantity to them. So let me just sort of go back to this article by Cassandra Oaten, and she writes that during your degree, realize that this 3 years, if you're doing it in 3 years, it might take you longer, is going to fly by. Once a month, she says, say no to your Saturday night partying, and instead stay home and actively think about what avenue you would like to go into career-wise. And kind of what she's capturing here is the thing which I may have said before, is that people don't think enough about their careers. They kind of sort of take it for granted that it's going to work out, that just doing the degree is enough to just, but whereas there's actually a whole lot more that needs to be invested for a good outcome to be more likely. And so I'm not necessarily suggesting that you stop going out on Saturday night, because that's important too. What she's pointing towards is that more time needs to be invested, and that she wishes that had she been able to go back in time, that she had invested more time thinking about this. And yeah, so in a similar way, like, we spend money on any number of things, our new phone or a new computer or something that we're going to spend a bit of money on. And when we spend money on those purchases, we often invest time doing research about it, comparing the different options and which is the best one, when is the next one coming out, should I wait for that, where you spend a lot. But we probably underinvest by a large degree, spending similar kinds of time and effort thinking about our careers and setting us up for the best outcome for our career life, especially given the magnitude of importance that it holds in our lives. And so we spend so much time researching our purchases, but we underinvest in other areas, despite the fact that that's so hugely important, and that there may well need to be some sacrifices that we need to make in order to make that investment towards a positive career outcome. But at the same time, this notion of sacrificing in order to gain something is also maybe a little bit wrong-headed, because if we want to be doing the things that we want to be doing for our work, then it's not really a sacrifice. We are kind of doing it's an investment in the thing that we want to be doing. So but I guess the more general point is we generally, as a general rule, need to be spending more time building towards this. So to recap a couple of things, we have ideas of how we want to live our lives, but and those ideas of how we want to live our life is often set into the future, and we forget that we do, in many ways, we live our lives every day and today, and the way we spend our days is, of course, the way we spend our lives. And similarly with respect to careers, on the one hand, you definitely need to be making investments now in order for positive career outcomes later on, but at the same time, there's so much we can be doing to start living those careers now and today, and exploring them and finding out about our match quality with different options that we might have, and exploring all of that. And we don't need to be delaying for some future time for all of that to be happening, to be doing what we want. We can start doing stuff that we like now, and that will only serve us in good ways, both now and into the future.